Welcome to the Graceful Exit podcast. I'm Kimberlee Hoertz, founder of the Graceful Exit, created to educate, empower, and support women as they navigate divorce. Beginning with us, we are putting a stop to the divorce stigma through meaningful conversations about the emotional and endearing experience divorce often brings. My hope is that you'll follow along on this journey and join our community of women navigating divorce with grace. So today I am actually going to be sharing my personal story. People have often asked me how old I was when I got married, and I did get married at a very young age, at the age of 23. It was straight out of college. I had known my boyfriend at that time, who ended up being my husband, about 3 months, and we got engaged right away. So we did have a long engagement of 18 months and then ended up getting married at the age of 23. And then I had my first child by the age of 25, and then 4 more to follow post that. I ended up getting a divorce at the age of 37. So back in 2017, I had filed for divorce when my youngest was 3 months old. I had been on bed rest for about 10 weeks prior to that, delivered my 4th baby, and then ended up getting information that led me to my divorce in 2017. And I would say that I had a pretty unhealthy marriage, but then my divorce was probably 10 times more horrific than my marriage actually ended up being. I had filed for it in May 2017. By August of that year, I was already about $100,000 worth of debt. I had gone through 2 different lawyers at that time, had gone through what we refer to as ex parte notice, where you get 4 hours to report to court. There was domestic violence charges, restraining orders. We went through what's called a 730 evaluation, and that's where the court orders psychologists to be involved in regards to what the best interests of the kids are. So you name it, I had been through it, and my divorce ended up lasting, I think I signed off my final paperwork at the end of 2020. Which was called a quadro, which we'll actually talk about later this month, is when you have financial assets such as 401ks or pensions that you have to separate. And so that was the final piece of our actual divorce. I think what took the longest was our custody schedule, trying to figure out navigating 4 kids with 4 different ages. So at the time I had, an 8, a 7-year-old, a 2-year-old, and a 3-month-old. And so trying to navigate those different ages and their activities, their school schedules. I had moved 45 minutes away from my ex to get that physical distance, in which I started building my life from the ground up, back where I relocated, back where I grew up. So I would say it was very much a lengthy process. Not one that I would wish upon my worst enemy. And again, that's where I hit rock bottom, in which I thought there had to be a different way about getting a divorce. There had to be an easier way to navigate this. I had often, a couple hours to navigate finding a lawyer or finding a counselor for my children. And there really wasn't one single platform out there that did it all. So I knew back in 17, when I started this vision, that there had to be a better way. And so that's when the Graceful Exit was somewhat formed in my head. And then it came to vision, picked it back up in about 2019, and then we ended up launching 3 months ago. In my divorce, there wasn't a single platform to find the resources I needed while going through it. And I often had hours to figure out what the next step was. So I often used Yelp, or I think it's a platform called Avo, where lawyers advertise. But the problem is that I didn't have the mindset that I needed to make good decisions. I was faced with navigating a career at the time, trying to raise 4 children, and then moving to a new location, and then fighting my ex on a lot of things. And so my mindset project wasn't one where I could spend hours upon hours navigating and trying to find the right lawyer, trying to find the right counselor. So I really didn't have a single place. I also didn't have a sense of community. And I was the first out of my friends, my family, to get divorced. And I felt so much shame, guilt, fear of having to tell people my story, having to tell people that I was getting a divorce. I had been married for 12 years, had 4 kids, had a successful career, and the image was all there. We had the $1 million home, the expensive cars. So from the outside looking in, nobody could tell that we had this unhealthy marriage and atmosphere, and it was a lot of shame and a lot of guilt when finally being able to tell my story. The hardest part of navigating the entire process was ensuring that my kids' normalcy in life was still there. Yes, their world was turned upside down by the time my mom and dad, or by the time their mom and dad, myself and my ex, were divorced. But trying to keep that sense of normalcy for them. So ensuring that that they were surrounded by friends and family, and I didn't disrupt their lives by being able to give them a solid foundation of the entire process was very trying at times and exhausting. There's often times where I didn't want to get out of bed, and it's so emotionally draining, but I knew I either had to be at court, I had to be at work, and I had to get these 4 kids out of bed into their new routine, their new normal. And it was just absolutely exhausting and probably the hardest time of the divorce. Being a single mom and trying to provide financially for them was absolutely draining. But at the same time, in the same hope and vein, I was able to find myself again. Thank goodness I had a career, a successful career, and that I did not need to rely on anybody for income. That was probably my biggest blessing. Now, I know not all women have that, but in my story, that was probably my saving grace, was that I didn't need him financially, and I could support these 4 kids on my own. I ended up having 100% custody right off the bat of the kids, and that soon changed, but that was an important piece of this, that I didn't lose my identity in all this. And I think the sense of hope is that I was able to find myself again. I took the time out of my crazy schedule. I ended up taking 6 months off my career at that time to really get the mental help that I needed. I was diagnosed with complex PTSD. I went through intense EMDR to really release a lot of the trauma that I had been exposed to. And I still actually deal with that today. 4 years post-divorce, I was yet diagnosed once again about 4 months ago, where I ended up on bed rest for about 4 months. My body couldn't take anymore and began to shut down. So it's something that stays with you if you cannot figure out a way to heal from it. So it's been a significant journey, but I definitely would say that I'm now on the other side of things, and experiencing the hope and joy that I feel, that once you get through it, you get through the thick of it, that there is joy on the other side. Probably one of the biggest questions I've been asked is, where do I find support? Where did I find support? I built a village post-divorce around me and helping me get through the day-to-day things. So the support came through my family and friends. My family is that loves me unconditionally no matter what happened. And my friends, they were there for me through the hardest times. Now, a lot of them were still married, so they didn't understand the pain that I was going through, nor could they comprehend what I had lived through, because I didn't share my story with anybody during my 12 years of marriage. So a lot of them came as a shock, but they were there to support me. And then, like I said, I built this village where I knew I couldn't raise these 4 kids on my own, while still having a career and still being pulled into court. So I spent quite a bit of time of making my circle of trust very close, in which I was able to rely on others and ask for help, which I didn't often do prior to divorce. I tried to do everything on my own, but I knew there's no way I could do this on my own. So I built this around me, and that ended up being my community, my rock. But I know oftentimes women don't have that. And so, again, part of the Graceful Exit is that I wanted to build this sense of community where women felt comfortable coming to this place, sharing their stories, and just have a sense of people empowering you and lifting you up and not putting you down, not putting the shame, not putting the guilt on you for getting a divorce. So the most joyful experience out of all this is finding my voice again. For so long, I did not have a voice. I felt like every decision was made for me. And for outside of the divorce, I've now regained the strength. I think regained my self-worth, and know that I can be okay. And the fact that I was able to find extremely healthy relationships and know that there are gentlemen out there that will love me for who I am, and that I love myself for who I am now. And I can recognize and empathize of those that have gone through this, and can really hope and hopefully lift them up and encourage and empower them to get through this. So if I had to give a piece of advice to my past self, what would it be? If I could go back in time, I think I would die for the education that I have now. I think a big piece of my journey is that I didn't know what a healthy relationship looked like, or what an abusive relationships look like, what were signs of abuse, what were signs of a narcissist, what were signs of control. I didn't have that knowledge, and you can call me naive, but I lived in very much a bubble growing up, and I wasn't exposed to any of this. So had I known the knowledge I have now going back, I think I would have turned out differently. And so that's again why it's so important for me. My mission here is really to educate that younger generation. Okay, what are healthy relationships, and what are signs of domestic violence? And what are ways that we can navigate this, for these younger women, that they will never fit into these types of situations. And so I really, truly hope that we can socialize these conversations and bring it to the forefront and not hide from it from shame or guilt. So everybody asks me, how did I come up with the name The Graceful Exit, and what grace has meant to me? And I stand by it. In 2017, I knew I really had two choices. I could really take a path where it would be very contentious and very ugly, but I also knew that I had 4 children that I once had to tell the story to. So it was extremely important that I navigated this entire experience with grace. And so what grace meant to me at that time was I wanted to be able to look all 4 of my kids in the eye and said I tried my best and I did it with grace. And what I mean by that is that my kids can follow in my footsteps. They won't be ashamed of the moves I've made or what I'm talking about now. But rather it's being transparent so that history doesn't repeat itself, and educating them on ways to do things better. And so that's where the name The Graceful Exit came about. Nowadays, I struggle with finding grace for myself, and that's why it's a constant reminder to me that every day I need to give myself grace. These are hard times, navigating this entire journey, but the fact that if I can give myself a little bit of grace every day in different ways, I think it would be extremely healthy if I can find that in myself. So tangible pieces of hope for those women that are going through this journey. One is, I would say, take each day at a time. So don't often think 6 months or a year ahead. You are in the absolute thick of things, where you need to take it as a day by day. Oftentimes I would see myself, well, how is this going to look in 5 years? I often caught myself doing that quite a bit of times, but I knew that in order to survive on the daily, I needed to take one day at a time, be present with my kids. I I would definitely say that I am such a better mother now post-divorce than I was prior. And the reason is I've now taken the time to be present with them. And now that I only have them half the time, you want to make each hour count, each minute count. So I'm able to be extremely present with them while I'm there. The other pieces of advice or hope I would give is that there are healthy relationships out there, but in order to do that, I really, truly, truly believe that you have to work on yourself first in order to fulfill what you need as a person, what you need for your future, and then that relationship will come later. So if you don't take time to heal for yourself first, I think we end up as women repeating the cycle often. And so I've heard so many women where they go on to their second marriage quickly, or tag on to another relationship super quick, because they want to fill that void, or they want to have that companion in life. They don't want to be alone. There's a fear of that. But what I stress to everybody that I've talked to along the way is that you need to take that time out for yourself to become the healthiest version of you, so that you too can go into that relationship to set a boundary, to set a foundation that you can have that healthy relationships. But my hope is, or my piece of hope is that there are very, very healthy relationships out there. I happen to be in one at the moment, hopefully forever. And we have 6 kiddos in tow. Ages range from 13 all the way down to 4. And we have navigated what we call this blended chaos, but pure joy. And it's absolutely so fun and exciting. And it's just, it's a great example that I'm showing my children and his as well, that there are healthy relationships that can exist, built out of respect and love for one another. And I think that's probably the biggest model and sense of hope that I can provide for all of my children. So this is the end of my story. I do so appreciate you guys listening in, enjoying the conversation and this community. And my hope is to really socialize this conversation and give people a voice, give women a platform to be able to share their experiences, and just being able to talk freely about this in a safe place. So I hope that you guys join the community. Thanks for watching.